Okay, guys, it is. I guess I started the wrong way. I watch a show by Lionel Nation where he hates it when people start with "Hey guys." So, good evening, everyone. It's 1 a.m. I hope I'm not going to be on for too long today, but I did want to get it in today because I don't know if there's going to be a broadcast tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that on Thursday it's going to be pretty hard for me to do a broadcast because, as you can see, we're playing the Washington Redskins this week. So I have, you know, it's the least I can do. So I'm going to move through a few topics today, and we're going to be staying right now on the sexual harassment. There is another video I'm going to be trying to make. I'm going to be trying to make either tomorrow or the day after, depending if there's going to be time. Like I said, on some more issues, more to do with policy and tax reform and things like that. And of course, I'm working on a long-term project with one other policy, which I'm not going to get into because it's not nearly ready to talk about. But I do want to say that the sexual harassment stuff is really starting to take its toll in many of the cases where the people are the people have just they've been worn down by attrition and they just can't go on. So you might remember with politics, the case that really became the lightning rod for the sexual harassment allegations originally was the Roy Moore case. And this week, actually, I think it was today, a campaign worker for Roy Moore, who's the Senate candidate for the Republican Party in Alabama, Roy Moore campaign official caught on video going after journalists. It says a campaign worker for Roy Moore, the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate from Alabama, well, let me enlarge the screen, was caught on video getting physical with a Fox News cameraman outside an event on Monday night. Connors Sheets of the Birmingham News, who shared the footage on Twitter, later identified the man shoving the photojournalist as Tony Goolsby, the Cobb County coordinator for the campaign and the organizer of the event in Henniger in the northeast corner of the state. The footage shows Goolsby grabbing the camera by the lens. A Fox News producer later wrote on Twitter that the cameraman was part of a crew from the network. A second man who has not been identified but is wearing a Moore sticker is seen yelling at another journalist. The Moore campaign has been reeling from accusations of sexual misconduct against the candidate by multiple women, including one who said she was 14 years old at the time. The campaign has responded by attacking the media, including vowing to never answer questions from the Washington Post, which first wrote the story. And then it says here the Washington Post is a worthless piece of crap that has gone way outside of its way to railroad Roy Moore. Moore campaign strategist Brett Doster told the Post last week, "There is no need for anyone at the Washington Post to ever reach out to the Roy Moore campaign again, because we will not respond to anyone from the Post now or in the future." So, look, there's been a lot of stuff about the Roy Moore fiasco. Today, Project Veritas, apparently one of their journalists, or I guess one of their moles, was exposed by the Washington Post within the Post for trying to forward a very dubious rape story. And I think that there's yet to be a lot of what would you call it? A lot of exposure is going to come from the Post and James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. If you don't know, Project Veritas has already been exposing a lot of the hypocrisy within the Washington Post. But this time they did have a setback. This woman was outed, and yeah, I think that they have to take the L. There's no two ways about it. Now with Roy Moore, here's the issue that's going to be in play coming forward. Let's say he is to be elected to the U.S. Senate, which I think he will be. By the way, in I think it was in May, A similar incident happened. Just this incident with a reporter happened in Montana. There was a Montana congressional race where the Republican candidate Greg Shanforte got into an altercation with a journalist named Ben Jacobs for The Guardian and body slammed him. This was the night before the event, before the election. And what do you think happened? He won. Not he didn't just win. I mean, he won basically by several nose lengths. He was pretty far ahead at the end. It wasn't a blowout, but it wasn't a close election in the end. With the Roy Moore race, I think that, and this is just talking about the state of the race. If you monitor polls lately, if you monitor a lot of the momentum, it is actually shifting back in favor of Roy Moore, who is this candidate who's been tainted by sexual harassment allegations. Now, I've stated several times that I'll never believe either side of the story until I actually see evidence either refuting or substantiating the claims. I don't know Roy Moore. I don't. I probably wouldn't really vote for him because I don't have too many of the same views. I mean, I think he's better than many of the liberal candidates that would be in the Senate, but I'm not one of those fire and brimstone church Republicans. Obviously, I come from a much more independent streak, so I don't know if I would support him, but this use of sexual harassment allegations in order to railroad somebody out of a race within a month of it happening, I think it's having the effect that it should have, which is to have the voters say, well, we're not going to be forced to make a choice based on allegations that are very difficult to substantiate, made by a paper that usually doesn't care at all about Alabama issues. Is this something that's based on real virtue or on on a caring for the victims? No, but it's the way that it should be, for a very simple reason, that you can't use elections or you can't manipulate elections by basically digging up skeletons about somebody that are difficult to prove within a very short time period. Okay, I'll give you an example from the distant past that I heard about because it happened before I was born. Thomas Eagleton was the Democratic vice presidential nominee in 1972, and I think he eventually had to withdraw because it was discovered that he'd undergone psychiatric shock therapy. So that doesn't really have anything to do with his policies or his beliefs or anything, but it automatically had people thinking, well, we can't have somebody like this anywhere near the nuclear football, and he was disqualified. Now, as it so happened, they completely got destroyed in that race. Him and, or rather, George McGovern, who was the Democratic candidate. But that's not the point. The point is that when you take somebody and he gets nominated, and he has the chance now to earn the mandate of the voter, and suddenly now the press takes an interest and they start digging up things about his past or whatever, and they start to make the claim, oh, well, you can't elect somebody who's being accused of sexual harassment or or even sexual contact with a minor. You can't have them possibly elected. Well, hold on a second. It's not up to a media outlet to actually decide who can or can't vote or run in a Senate race until somebody's convicted of a crime or otherwise becomes ineligible for the office. I think that the press should at least try to maintain a veneer of impartiality. It's by no coincidence that media outlets, they'll cover and pry into certain campaigns more than others. It's clear that from last year, the Washington Post and other similar publications, they did their darndest not to look at what was really going on with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And now that a new landscape has been formed, by this revolution of last year, the Trump 2016 revolution. They're trying to make it seem like they're conducting honest journalism. Well, it is journalism of some sort. Yeah, you should report on rape claims, on claims of sexual assault or whatever, but you can't expect people to take everything you say as the gospel truth now, because you've been caught several times ignoring actual stories, huge stories that should be at the forefront of the news. They just seem to fall off the face of the earth last year. I remember there was a piece in the Washington Post, I think it was the Washington Post, where they said that the Clinton cash book was discredited and that a lot of the stuff was unsubstantiated. Well, as the time has gone on, more and more things that were shown in that book by, I think it was Peter Schweitzer, those have been proven to be true. So that's all I'm going to say about the Roy Moore case for now. And like I said, I'm not claiming anybody's innocent here. In fact, in the next case that we're going to talk about, the Conyers case, I'm not going to claim that he's guilty either, even though there's more evidence that John Conyers committed an act of sexual harassment and you know, and especially in the workplace, than there has ever been of Roy Moore. Let me check if there was any comment in the chat. So what's going on here? Here we go. Okay, nothing in the chat. Just checking this message. Okay. Back to the orders of business. Now, John Conyers, for those of you that don't know, he's been serving in Congress, I think, for 48 years now. So 48 years, a lot of people, they don't get to work in the same job for 4 years, right? This man, who is, I think, in his late 80s, has been serving the same district in Michigan for about 48 years. So this piece in the New York Post was, I think, pretty good. And you know, the New York Post, I think, they write a lot of crap, a lot of like stupid clickbait stories, but some of their opinion pieces are pretty well written and good to, you know, they're good for the eyes in terms of just fast paced. They're not too, what's the word? They're not too snobby like the New York Times. I like the New York Post for several reasons, and one of them is their style is a little looser. So it's here. It says, it's from Rich Lowry. It says there are sexual harassers, and then there is John Conyers, the Democrat from Detroit, who made his congressional office an adjunct of his libido. The evidence suggests Conyers believed that as a 27-year term congressman, so it's even more, it's 54 years, he was entitled to the Washington, D.C. equivalent of the Ottoman imperial harem. He routinely hit on his female staffers, and his office was a den of sexual intrigue, allegedly featuring a jealous wife and a vindictive mistress. His ex-wife, by the way, was Monica Conyers, who was herself, I think she was convicted of some corruption charges. That properly belongs in a Bravo reality show if the network ever extends its Real Housewives franchise to Capitol Hill. A political party is rarely provided an easier test case for its bona fides. Conyers is an 88-year-old man who finds it increasingly difficult to carry out his duties. He holds an exceptionally safe seat, an exceedingly safe seat that, should he resign, will be taken over by another reliably progressive Democrat. In this case, the political cost to the party of showing that it's serious about zero tolerance for sexual harassment is almost nil. Yet House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, when asked about Conyers on Meet the Press, mumbled and looked at her shoes. She wasn't able to summon any dudgeon, let alone high dudgeon, about Conyers. The harshest thing she said is that as John renews his case, which he knows, which I don't, I believe he will do the right thing. Oh, really? Conyers did step down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Otherwise, his careful review of his own case has provided categorical denials that even Pelosi must find incredible. It's true Conyers hasn't had his day in front of the House Ethics Committee, but neither has Roy Moore. that hasn't kept Pelosi from denouncing him. The multiple allegations against Conyers are specific and consistent. He reached a settlement agreement with one accuser whose account is backed by affidavits from other employees. One woman said in an affidavit that one of her duties was to keep a list of women I assumed he was having affairs with and call them at his request, and if necessary, have them flown in using congressional resources. Not having to bother with the logistics of your own mistresses is evidently one of the privileges of being a public servant. Another accuser, a former Conyers scheduler, filed a lawsuit that she eventually dropped when the court refused her request to keep it sealed. She says she didn't want to harm Conyers' reputation. In the suit, she says she complained to Conyers' chief of staff about his unwelcome attitude. The chief of staff told her to write them all down. She couldn't due to the extreme amount of time it would require to adequately chronicle these advances and behaviors and manage her workload. At one point, the wife of the congressman accused the scheduler of having an affair with Conyers and threatened to get her fired. Just another day at the office of the congressman from Michigan's 13th district. Pelosi offers two justifications for going easy on Conyers. One is that the congressman is a civil rights icon. By this logic, being a legend is a little like being a celebrity, as described by Donald Trump in the Access Hollywood tape. It's a free pass for gross behavior. The other Pelosi rationale is that Conyers has done a great job to protect women. This makes ideology rather than personal conduct the standard. The controversy over Conyers arrives as some liberal Democrats now say Bill Clinton should have resigned as president for sexual misconduct. Of course, they could have said that 20 years ago or even 1 year ago. The evasion over Conyers makes it clear that if the Clintons had any political juice left, it would be a very difficult story. Whatever Democrats say about sexual harassment should be affixed with a giant asterisk. If it doesn't suit their political and ideological interests, generous exceptions can and will apply. So my take on this is very simple. John Conyers, he should be the first victim of a standard that was very high that the Democrats should have known that they can't keep, the standard of sexual harassment codes. And for him to stay in Congress, despite the fact that, yeah, there's that settlement, and yeah, there are more accusers now that are coming out. Look, it's obvious now that if we were to hold the Democrats the standards that they hold Roy Moore, then Conyers would have been expelled from the House right now already. So, yeah, I think with that case, we're going to see a huge fault line. There's also the Al Green issue. Let me see if there's any news on that. So, okay, so I didn't know this, but okay, so Politico says Representative Green issues unprompted statement on settled allegations. I'm going to put this in the chat, and hopefully I can't edit I can't edit anything while I'm in here. So I have a friend who's asking what was wrong with my car, but he won't ask in the chat. I wonder why. Oh, what was wrong with the car? For those of you that don't know, I had some car trouble this week and last week. It was Chinese alternators. So this week or today, I guess, my mechanic, who I've known for a long time, and who was making fun of this podcast today while I was at the mechanic, because he found out about me having this podcast, which the person asking the question knows something about. So he said that he got an original Nissan alternator, and we'll see what happens. And if there's something wrong, I guess I'll go back to driving my S10 or something and having some Huskies pull it along the highway or something. And that's it. But can't believe I'm answering questions from private chat on the podcast. So, but thanks for keeping me awake. I'm really drowsy now. Anyway, so John Conyers and Al Green. So Al Green says Representative Al Green, Democrat for Texas, issued an unprompted joint statement with a female former staffer who years ago made and later dropped allegations of sexual assault, with a two on Monday calling the matter absolutely resolved. Green and Lucinda Daniels, let me just X this out, said that due to the current political climate, they wished to jointly quiet any curious minds about our former and present relationship with one another. This matter has been resolved without payment of any money or transfer of any consideration of any kind by either of us to the other, Green and Daniels said Monday. As friends, we have both agreed that we see no need to make further statements regarding this absolutely resolved matter. I think this buddy of mine is the only person watching, so that's pretty. You might as well use the chat because it goes away after the video is over. So Green and Daniels added that they both regret our former claims and have maintained a respectful relationship. In the initial incident, Daniels had said the congressman assaulted her in 2007. Green in 2008 filed a lawsuit against Daniels in which he asked a federal judge to find he had never discriminated against her in the workplace, then withdrew it after Daniels signed a statement dropping her own allegations. So that's going to be funny if anything comes of it. And there's probably going to be a few more questions to resolve whether anything else happened with this Al Green. But yeah, it's strange, and he's the guy who was driving the impeachment procedure. The actual impeachment procedure was filed by this Al Green guy, who's kind of a strange looking dude, but he actually does sound kind of intelligent. So I guess good for him. This next story says good riddance to Lena Dunham, also from the New York Post. So Lena Dunham's the creator of that show Girls. It says Lena Dunham may be the first person to fabricate details of her alleged rape, then proclaim all women's claims need to be believed, and then publicly accuse a young woman of lying about having been raped. Finally, the star and creator of Girls has been exposed as the empty vessel she is. Girls was never the smart generational criticism Dunham always claimed. Really, it was just a smuttier, younger Sex in the City. Nor is there as much daylight between Dunham and her shallow, entitled character, Hannah Horvath, as she'd have us believe. She says, I think I might be the voice of a generation, Hannah tells her parents in the first episode, or at least a voice of a generation. Yeah, that's a pretty dumb line. It was supposed to be a joke, but all too quickly, Dunham embraced this notion herself, no doubt emboldened by the real estate afforded her in New York Magazine, The New Yorker, and The New York Times. So what if she was a 25-year-old with no real life experience? What she had to say clearly mattered, until, that is, November 17th, when Dunham and colleague Jenny Connor came to the defense of Murray Miller, a writer on Girls accused of rape. A police report had been filed, yet here came a statement no one asked for, brimming with smug superiority. While our first instinct is to listen to every woman's story, they wrote in part, our insider knowledge of Murray's situation makes us confident that sadly this accusation is one of the 3% of assault cases that are misreported every year. This is just one of the many problems with Dunham. She speaks, usually unbidden, with complete moral and philosophical authority until she's called out online, at which point she furiously and pathetically backpedals. She's a total hypocrite who claims we're the ones who have issues with her body and slovenly dress, yet she strains to appear sexy and glamorous on the red carpet. She wants desperately to be liked while claiming she doesn't care if we like her. She's a narcissist who possesses no intellectual rigor, no belief system, no relationship with the truth. I'm an unreliable narrator, she wrote in her 2014 memoir, Not That Kind of Girl. She begins a chapter called Barry, named for the student she claimed raped her as a college student at Olbermann. Barry, Dunham wrote, was an unstylish white Republican, of course, who had a mustache, wore cowboy boots, and hosted a radio show. A girl he'd once had sex with, Dunham wrote, said Barry left her bedroom splattered like a crime scene in blood. Dunham wrote that she had a few versions of the story in her mind, but But other people, including curiously a girls' writer named Murray, helped her see she'd been raped. The only, I'm just laughing because she had to be convinced that she was raped. The only problem with this story, just one guy in Dunham's time frame on her campus fit this description. His name was Barry. He'd never raped her. Whether Dunham knew or cared about the damage she'd done, falsely accusing a man the media quickly identified, giving unfair leverage to those who would doubt future victim stories, became typically less important than her experience of the whole media maelstrom. It says, if I had hoped beyond hope that the sensitive nature of the event, meaning her ostensible rape, would be honored and that no one would attempt to reopen these wounds or deepen my trauma, Dunham wrote. Instead, I have had my character and credibility questioned at every turn. How ironic. How ironic. In this Me Too moment, Dunham's social and political tone deafness only underscores how out of touch she is, a product of wealthy artist parents, a downtown New York upbringing, a homogeneous world of rich white friends insulated from white life's hardships. Dunham was ushered into Hollywood via nepotism in her early 20s. She has everything middle America resents about coastal elites, rightfully so. She's not nearly as smart as she thinks. She doesn't know what feminism means. This is a woman who said she'd never had an abortion, but I wish I had. In her memoir, she wrote about obsessing over her baby sister Grace to an alarming degree. Basically, Dunham wrote, this is a creepy part. I remember this. This was something. Okay, what I'm about to read, some of you might know about. It's some of the weirdest shit that I've ever seen. Hold on, I got. So it says, basically, Dunham wrote, anything a sexual predator might do to woo a small suburban girl, I was trying. She wrote of masturbating in bed next to Grace, and that she'd once pulled apart Grace's legs to find pebbles up her toddler sister's vagina. This is gonna, yeah, that's. This isn't the first time I'm reading it, and it still seems pretty retarded. This, like, probably this is the fifth time I've heard this story because I've heard numerous people bringing it up. It's hilarious and disgusting at the same time. Says she posed pantsless for well-known sexual predator Terry Richardson. I didn't know that one. She accused Odell Beckham Jr. of horrible thoughts because he didn't talk to her at last year's Met Gala. Probably because Odell Beckham Jr. enjoys talking to people that aren't narcissistic losers. That's what I think. It was like he looked at me and he determined I was not the shape of a woman by his standards. He was like, that's a marshmallow, that's a child, that's a dog. Lastly, and perhaps most damning of all, she gave away her rescue dog when he became, she said, too much. So that's one of those funny ones that people throw in there. Like, you know, she also tears the tag off of her throw pillows. Lena Dunham has had innumerable chances, but time and again only proves her horribleness. This dude just keeps texting me. Use the chat, you asshole. Or is he using the chat? There's a fucking chat in the window. I gotta neutralize this Hangouts because I can instantly when Hangouts has a message, it just appears on my computer screen. Days after the Harvey Weinstein scandal broke, Dunham wrote in a New York Times op-ed that she hears stories from victims themselves at a rate that feels positively dystopian, and ignoring bad behavior remains the signature move of men in Hollywood. Not just men, clearly, Lena Dunham, take your lead. So this woman journalist, by the way, Maureen Callahan, I think she wrote a pretty good piece. It is a little over the top though, because let's be honest, what Lena Dunham did, even the Pebble shit, which is really fucked up, if you think about it, is not as bad as a Harvey Weinstein or actually raping somebody. But seriously, this is a woman who if you looked at the circumstances of that story, it's not just that one guy that was apparently exposed, according to this article. There was actually a second person once the first guy was ruled out. They were both harassed to no end, and I think one of them actually had to relocate. He had to actually change his place of residence. He had to move out of state or something. So this is a woman who she's gone around and basically filled the world with garbage anywhere she's went. And I hope that her show crashes and burns. It's not. I mean, I've seen like 5 minutes of the show in my entire life, and it's the dumbest crap ever. And I heard, it's kind of dirty and what, and there's tons of like nudity or whatever, which I don't have a problem with. But there's once it involves Lena Dunham, then yeah, I think I'm gonna pass, and I think you should pass too. Then there's one more thing with journalism. It's Keith Olbermann, the wacko who should have stayed at ESPN and shut his mouth and never gone into news journalism, says, after 187 episodes and nearly 500 million views, Keith Olbermann signs off. And he says, I am confident now, even more so than I have been throughout last year, that this nightmare presidency of Donald Trump will end prematurely and end soon. And I am thus also confident that this is the correct moment to end this series of commentaries. And important stuff first. There are 7 routes in front of Trump. Each inevitably ends in his impeachment or resignation. The first, the likeliest, became 1,000 times more likely with the Thanksgiving news of a possible deal between Robert Mueller and General Michael Flynn. As I reported here as long ago as April 4th, the most specifically qualified expert alive on the subject of prosecuting a president, my friend, the next Nixon White House counsel John Dean, put it to me very simply. Mueller is not shooting down. Mueller does not make a deal with Flynn to get Paul Manafort. He does not make a deal with Flynn to get Jared Kushner. He does not make a deal with Flynn to get Trump Jr. Mueller makes a deal with Flynn to get Donald Trump, period. The Flynn deal report suggests Mueller has completely assembled the backbone of his case and is now just hanging the meat from it. And just as importantly, if Flynn has merely considered a deal from Mueller, it almost certainly means Flynn either doesn't believe he would get a pardon from Trump, or that Mueller, as I've also reported here, has succeeded in finding a way around Trump's pardon power, and either of these near certainties spell Trump's doom. So what's the most obvious of the 7 ways for Trump to go? So that's the most obvious of the 7 ways for Trump to go. Mueller really will get him on Russia. It will be ugly and it will tear this country. He actually misspells tear, T-A-R-E. I think that's the one that you use, I think, for zeroing a scale or something. Okay, I'm being a grammar Nazi, but what do you want? He calls everybody else a Nazi. But it will be necessary. The second way is, as I've also repeatedly suggested here, that Mueller doesn't really need to prove anything about Trump and Russian sabotage of the election. There seems to be so much obstruction of justice, from the firing of James Comey to the lies about Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians, that it's hard to pick out a key player in the Trump inner circle who couldn't be guilty of it. Trump could be impeached on just obstruction of justice and a few lesser charges. Nixon was about to be. Or there is the third way. We could be spared the trauma of a Russia impeachment or an obstruction of justice impeachment, as we were spared it with Nixon. If Trump is smart or just sufficiently scared and he resigns, or whatever. This is too much shit here. Yeah, he actually goes through 7 different things of bullshit. So maybe we'll come back to this some other time. But he says, well, this ballgame is over, and I don't think it's going to last another 13 months. And so this series is over. This was intended as something temporary, a 2-month project by somebody who had given up politics, and instead it became 187 commentaries and around 225,000 words and something approaching 400 million views, and I am proud of it, and I repudiate none of it. And it's been my privilege to do it, and I'm especially proud to have done these videos for free and for charity. But frankly, I've not enjoyed 1 minute of it. As I'm certain it has also been for you. For me, it has been unadulterated pain and revulsion and horror. The process has become nearly 24/7, and I've said so much that I can and have recycled old commentaries from months ago, and they've been fully applicable to breaking news. We've come full circle to such a complete degree on Sunday. Trump tweeted a complaint about, quote, Russia, Russia, Russia. The title of the 46th episode of The Resistance from March 14th was, quote, Russia, Russia, Russia. I've made my point. Yeah, you have made your point, you dumb fuck. So now that I think the outcomes, the 7 different, when is he going to shut the fuck up? The 7 different inevitable outcomes are unavoidable. I'd like to go back, enjoy some of my life again, and I'm going to. You enjoy that, you idiot. No illness, no scandal, no firing, just I've said what I've had to say. It was as obvious as I made it seem. I give my work everything I can, so it's not like I can dial this back. And I think even this dim-witted world of American political TV reporting, which is still calculating how to get Trump's idiot supporters to watch their networks and still watching for Trump to pivot, even it can carry this the rest of the way. So I'm retiring from political commentary in all media venues. This is the this is not to say a bed of roses and reconciliation awaits us. The post-Trump America will be relieved of his prodigious evil, but in its place it will have Trump as living martyr. The prodigious evil and rank hypocrisy and immorality of his supporters, perhaps a third of us, will not vanish with him, and I'm not sure that the democracy has not been damaged too much to deal with their lawless, unprincipled rebellion, and I do not see this country's politics truly healing in the next 30 or 40 years. But at least the bleeding will be staunched, and we'll have a chance to alter a phrase I heard somewhere to make America America again. So don't make it great, but make it America. Thank you for all the kind words and all the support. Have fun storming the castle. My work here is done. Matter of fact, so is Trump's. Resist, remove, peace. So just so we can really get our bearings here, he still thinks that the Russia scandal is going to bury Donald Trump because of Michael Flynn. And I'm sorry to tell him, but even if Michael Flynn were to flip on Donald Trump and expose the reason Michael Flynn would do this would probably be to save his own ass. Okay? From whatever crime he had committed that he could be implicated for. And I will continue to say until I hear anything new that until they actually indicate how there was a crime committed, the whole Russia thing is a bunch of fucking retarded bullshit. There's nothing to talk about. It's not. There hasn't been any revelation of a crime. Nobody knows how it was done. The only allegation is that people met some other people. People meet people all the time. Okay, if collusion is really a problem, then why were these people supporting a candidate, Hillary Clinton, that was meeting people from all over the world for years before before she ran for president? Okay, so part of that was when she was Secretary of State. It's still a problem. She hit that reset button with Russia, and then we never saw Russia be held accountable for probably, I think, a good 4 or 5 years, and then they invaded Ukraine. So in my mind, these people that are constantly complaining about Russia and about Flynn and whatever, these people are deluding themselves. And Keith Olbermann, good riddance. The guy was absolutely a basket case. You would watch him; his mind was clearly falling apart like a orange that had gone rotten or something. The peel is just flaking away or something. So, hopefully they put him in some sort of padded cell. And then there's one last story. I promised the other story was the last story, but I lied. And it says Louis Gutierrez's totally abnormal retirement ploy. And for those of you who don't know, that Louis Gutierrez is the most fanatical anti-wall politician in the House. He's one of these immigration. He's an immigration advocate, illegal immigration, DACA, whatever. He says the abruptness and timing So the article says the abruptness and timing of the congressman's announcement raises questions about his motives. And apparently, it says right here, before most up-and-coming officials could even examine their own prospects for Gutierrez's seat, it was already too late. By the time news broke that the congressman was on his way out, he had already handpicked and endorsed Cook County Commissioner Jesus Chuy Garcia to succeed him. So I'd read the article briefly before coming on, and because I kind of want to go, I'm going to summarize it. Basically, what he did was he resigned within I think, a week of the filing deadline, meaning that most people were not going to run for his seat on the Democratic ticket, meaning to primary him, if they knew he was going to run, because they would know that this guy's an incumbent, he'd be a little too strong to face. So what he basically did was he railroaded all the competition out, because now the guy who's succeeding him, he's the only person who will be able to gather those signatures, and instead it's going to be a clear race for him, and the guy's going to be elected without any roadblocks. This is the way they do it in Chicago. This is the fake Democratic Party, because if it was really democratic, they would have held an open forum and talked about who could be the next candidate. Now, I get it. It could be that he was just on the fence of whether to retire or not retire. But to me, and to this article too, it stinks of complete and total machine politics. And that's the way that the Democrats run everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple years we don't discover that Gutierrez took some sort of job as a quid pro quo for this from some sort of immigration advocacy group, or he took a few vacations on their dime or something, or speaking gigs. That's the way they do it. And they'll never change. And that's why we need, in whatever areas where this hasn't taken hold, or where there's a little sign of daylight between machine politics and real democracy, we have to reject this type of thing where friends eat for free or whatever. People bring their plus one in order to feed from the trough with them. But that's about it. I am feeling a little tired, so please, tomorrow night I hope to do another one, but subscribe to my podcast. Let me know what you think about these topics. I think that there could be some more weird things going on with either of these. We talked about, I think, 4 or 5 people today that are leaving politics or on the verge of being pushed out. Let's kind of expand on this. Let's see who you guys think and why that they have some skeletons to hide, and that's why they're leaving. Good night and stay bold.